Questioning and asking questions is probably one of the best ways of learning. It's something that is inherent in the Socratic method. It's something that you see in the dialogues of Plato, which is frankly all we know anything about Socrates anyway. And this idea of skepticism is something that is central to the cynical mission. The Cynics were a group of pseudo-scholars in ancient Greece, led by Antisthenes, who was himself a disciple of Socrates in the 5th century. And these people were ascetics, they were the monks of their day. They had contempt for wealth, for power, and I was going to say that I was going to say quoting the sort of general principle, contempt for wealth, power, and fame, but it's not really true, because Diogenes, who is one of the big cynics, was deeply famous enough for Alexander the Great to have a particularly famous conversation with him where he said, "Get out of my sunlight." But this idea of being self-sufficient, being ascetic, being bold, being rude, and apatheia. Apatheia is freedom from passion. And there are so many cynics, and the whole tradition has taken a sort of leap in value simply because of the rise of the skeptical point of view as part of the Enlightenment. But it also gives rise to Stoicism, and Stoicism is one of the movements that was incorporated into early Christianity. And therefore, although one thinks of cynics as being simply rude and hostile, they are embedded into the Western thought process simply because they're the prime movers in the tradition of keeping skepticism alive. They inherited that idea from Plato, from Socrates, and therefore they are significantly important. And I'm very mindful of cynics as I look around, and their influence. But it can go too far. Too much skepticism is like too much of anything. Too much sugar, too much abstinence, and in the end, a rejection of all basic principles is a rejection of everything. Ultimately, cynicism means living in a barrel with the dogs, and there's not much to be said about that. If you're living in a barrel, I don't suppose you're trolling the internet. I don't suppose there's any point. Where would you get your electricity from? So skepticism is good. Cynicism is cheap, really. Rather like sarcasm. Cheap. Wit, satire, and skepticism, good. Cynicism, and those who praise cynicism, There's not very much mileage in it, is there? So I think when we're looking at modern politics and when we're looking at the traditions and the principles that underpin the Enlightenment and what we've learnt from the Enlightenment and the attempt to try and avoid ad hominem fallacies and sort of general nastiness. Cynicism, it's important. It's a significant part of the traditions of ancient Greece, and rather like yeah, the cynics of today are wheeled out rather like those people who interpret hand movements. Not very many hand movements that need interpreting here, except possibly Liz Truss's, and the self-satisfied hand movements of the self-obsessed and the onanistic trolls. But the cynics are interesting. The cynics are interesting, mostly because they give us the Stoics, and the Stoics are fascinating. And Stoicism is part of the tradition on which Western civilization was founded, and a good indifference. One of the principles of cynicism is apatheia, and we get the English word apathy from it, but it's not what apatheia really means. Apatheia is indifference. And if today you have £1 million and tomorrow you have nothing, that is being able to live with that is apatheia. Today God gives, tomorrow God takes away. That is the principle of Job. And that, I think, is why Stoicism and the Judeo-Christian, strange expression, really, I think we should talk about the Abrahamic traditions, fit so well together. But it's not because they are cynical, it's because they are Stoic. Stoicism adopts a good deal from cynicism and improves on it. The cynic is the backwaters of history and is dead in the water. The Stoic is still alive and has been transformed into something rather magnificent. And Stoic resilience is something to praise.